We are being shown the wrong scoreboard, not because the war isn't real, not because the casualties aren't real, not because the strategic stakes in the Middle East aren't genuine. They are all genuine. But the scoreboard you're being shown, the one with interception percentages, press briefings, and footage of air defense systems lighting up the night sky, that scoreboard is measuring the wrong game. And the price of watching the wrong scoreboard is being invoiced somewhere else entirely, by someone who isn't firing a single shot. Let me show you what I mean with one specific moment. March 2026, somewhere over the Arabian Peninsula, an Iranian Shahed 136 loitering munition is cruising toward a U.S. military installation at 120 miles per hour. It's roughly the size of a motorcycle. It's assembled from commercial components, the kind you could source from an electronics supplier without raising a single flag. Iran's military paid approximately $30,000 to put it in the air. To stop it, an American Patriot PAC-3 interceptor launches from its battery. Cost, $3,700,000. That is 125 times the value of the target it is chasing. Now I need you to do something the evening news will never ask you to do. Don't watch the explosion. Don't absorb the word intercepted and feel reassured. Sit with the transaction. Because that transaction, $30,000 incoming, $3,700,000 outgoing, repeated dozens of times, then hundreds of times, then thousands of times across the skies of the Middle East, is the mechanism by which the most powerful military in human history is quietly hollowing out its own ability to fight the conflict that will actually define this century. And that conflict is not in Iran. I've spent a decade studying conflict economics and great power competition. I've watched America's military doctrine evolve from Cold War dominance into something I can only describe as technological arrogance wearing the uniform of strategy. Precision systems of breathtaking sophistication, breathtaking expense, and breathtaking fragility the moment an adversary figures out the cost ratio and simply leans into it. What I'm watching right now in real time is not a military victory. It is a slow-motion industrial collapse disguised as a successful campaign. And the people reporting on it, the anchors, the officials, the briefers at podiums, are either not looking at the numbers or have decided the numbers are too uncomfortable to share. So let's share them. Let me start with the air defense picture, because this is where the misdirection is most complete. Nevatim Air Base in the southern Negev Desert is, by any reasonable assessment, one of the most valuable concentrations of military hardware on the planet. 3 squadrons of F-35I Adir stealth fighters, the 116th, the 140th, and the 117th. 39 of the most sophisticated combat aircraft ever built, with contracts already signed to expand that fleet to 75 jets by 2028. Each aircraft costs approximately $96 million. 39 aircraft, $3.7 billion sitting on a runway. And that figure doesn't include the hardened shelters, the intelligence targeting centers, the maintenance depots, or the newly constructed hangars for KC-46 aerial refueling tankers. Add the full infrastructure, and you're looking at a multi-billion-dollar concentration of offensive military power in a single geographic location that Iran's military planners have marked at the very top of their target list. This is not an accident. This is the logic of asymmetric warfare applied at the strategic level. Iran doesn't need to destroy all of Nevatim. It doesn't need to destroy half of it. It only needs to demonstrate once, credibly, that the shield can be overwhelmed, that somewhere in a barrage of 50 or 100 or 200 incoming missiles, a few will get through. Because once the F-35I fleet is grounded, even temporarily, Israel loses its primary tool for penetrating Iranian airspace, the offensive edge disappears, and the entire strategic architecture of Western deterrence in the region unravels with it. So how does Israel defend Nevatim? With the best air defense money can buy. The Arrow 3 exo-atmospheric interceptor, developed jointly with Boeing, at between $2 and $4 million per shot. The Patriot PAC-3 at $3,700,000 per shot. And at the top of the pyramid, the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense System, THAAD. where a single interceptor costs $12,700,000 and a complete battery costs $1 billion to field. Now here is where the mathematics becomes something almost philosophical. In the 10 days of the initial kinetic exchange between the U.S.-Israeli coalition and Iran in early 2026, American and Israeli forces fired an estimated 133 advanced interceptors to maintain that celebrated 90% interception success rate. The cost of that 10-day defense? Approximately $1.28 billion in interceptors alone. Just the missiles fired to stop the other missiles, not aircraft operations, not logistics, not the carrier groups burning $13 million a day just to stay on station. Now look at what was coming at them. Iran's offensive arsenal for this engagement leaned heavily on its Zulfikar short-range ballistic missiles at approximately $150,000 each. Its medium-range Imad platforms around $250,000. Even its most advanced heavy systems come in at estimates around $8 million per unit. The cost-exchange ratio, in the most charitable interpretation of the available data, favors the attacker by 48-1. When you're using a $12 million THAAD round to intercept a $150,000 ballistic missile, that ratio becomes 85-1. But here is the number that never makes the headline beneath the word intercepted. The number that keeps senior Pentagon officials staring at ceilings at 3 in the morning. The United States produces between 12 and 18 THAAD interceptors per year. In the first phase of this conflict, American forces fired 92 of them. Read that again. 12 to 18 produced per year, 92 fired in days. They burned through 5 to 7 years of production capacity in a matter of days. The Missile Defense Agency has publicly acknowledged that the procurement shortfall for new THAAD deliveries will not be resolved until April 2027. The factory lines cannot simply be turned up like a faucet. These systems require exotic materials, precision machined guidance components, solid fuel propulsion systems built to tolerances measured in microns. Each one is essentially hand-assembled by a workforce that took years to train. Rebuilding that inventory takes years, not months, years. So when the generals report 99% of targets intercepted, they are technically correct. What they are not telling you is the following. The magazine is getting empty. The next Iranian salvo costs Tehran roughly the same as the last one. The next American response costs production capacity that doesn't exist yet. The attacker reloads faster than the defender manufactures. That is not a tactical problem. That is a structural flaw in the entire architecture of Western deterrence, and it was visible years before the first missile of this conflict was fired. Every analyst who studied the economics of saturation warfare saw it coming. The question was never whether the trap would close. The question was only when. It has closed. But here's what makes this more than a missile economics story. Because while all of that is happening in the skies above the Arabian Peninsula, something else is happening simultaneously in the mountains of western Iran, and almost no mainstream coverage has connected the two. Iran is not a monolithic state. It is a multi-ethnic empire held together by a security apparatus, economic patronage, and decades of coercion. Approximately 9 to 10 million Kurds live within its borders. That's roughly 10% of the entire population, concentrated along the western frontier in provinces that the Islamic Republic has treated for generations with cultural suppression, economic neglect, and periodic military force. What Tehran built over those decades was not loyalty. It built a reservoir of grievance the size of a mountain range, literally. The Zagros Mountains stretch 1,600 kilometers along Iran's western border. Jagged ridges, deep valleys, natural choke points, peaks exceeding 3,000 meters, snow, rockfall, terrain that has swallowed conventional armies for centuries. During the Iran-Iraq War of the 1980s, Saddam Hussein sent mechanized divisions into these mountains and watched them bleed out in the passes. The Zagros does not yield to tanks and artillery. It yields to men who know it. And there are men who know it. The Kurdistan Free Life Party, PJAK, fields up to 3,000 battle-hardened fighters. Many of them are veterans of the war against ISIS in Syria and Iraq, trained in small unit tactics and ambush operations across exactly this terrain. The Kurdistan Democratic Party of Iran, KDPI, adds another 1,000 to 2,000 fighters with decades of institutional knowledge and cross-border intelligence networks reaching back into the 1940s. The Kurdistan Freedom Party, PAK, fields several hundred personnel. And here is the detail that demands particular attention. PAK fighters were formally trained by U.S. military instructors in 2015 during the anti-ISIS campaign in Kirkuk. American doctrine, American training, Iranian Kurdish hands. The Zagros Mountains stretch 1,600 kilometers along Iran's western border. Jagged ridges, deep valleys, natural choke points, peaks exceeding 3,000 meters, snow, rockfall, terrain that has swallowed conventional armies for centuries. During the Iran-Iraq War of the 1980s, Saddam Hussein sent mechanized divisions into these mountains and watched them bleed out in the passes. The Zagros does not yield to tanks and artillery. It yields to men who know it. And there are men who know it. The Kurdistan Free Life Party, PJAK, fields up to 3,000 battle-hardened fighters. Many of them are veterans of the war against ISIS in Syria and Iraq, trained in small unit tactics and ambush operations across exactly this terrain. The Kurdistan Democratic Party of Iran, KDPI, adds another 1,000 to 2,000 fighters with decades of institutional knowledge and cross-border intelligence networks reaching back into the 1940s. The Kurdistan Freedom Party, PAK, fields several hundred personnel. And here is the detail that demands particular attention. PAK fighters were formally trained by U.S. military instructors in 2015 during the anti-ISIS campaign in Kirkuk. American doctrine, American training, Iranian Kurdish hands. Together, across all factions, we are looking at 6,000 to 8,000 armed fighters operating in terrain designed by geography itself to amplify their advantages and neutralize the IRGC's conventional superiority. On February 22, 2026, these historically fragmented factions achieved something unprecedented. 5 major armed Kurdish parties formally established a unified coalition, the CPFIK, with a stated objective of overthrowing the Islamic Republic and establishing civil governance in whatever power vacuum follows. Intelligence reports indicate the CIA is actively working to arm these forces. Trump reportedly made a direct phone call to KDPI leadership, signaling strategic coordination well beyond unofficial contact. And in early March 2026, U.S. and Israeli air assets specifically targeted Iranian law enforcement command headquarters in Kurdish cities, Sanandaj, Marivan, facilities that serve as the regime's primary instrument of internal control in the region. Destroy the security apparatus and the path for Kurdish fighters moving east from the Zagros becomes considerably less obstructed. From a pure tactical standpoint, this is elegant. The IRGC is being forced to divert resources, manpower, and air defense systems away from the Persian Gulf and the Israeli border to secure an interior front stretching 1,600 kilometers of mountain terrain. Every battalion deployed to Kermanshah is a battalion not defending a missile battery near Tehran. Every radar system repositioned to cover the Zagros is a gap in coverage over the Strait of Hormuz. Iran is being forced to fight 2 wars simultaneously, and the second front costs its architects almost nothing. But here is where a decade of watching these dynamics forces me to say something the people cheering this strategy do not want to hear. The Kurdish front is also a trap, just a different kind, one that catches a different set of victims. Sponsoring a genuine Kurdish insurgency, really arming it, committing American intelligence infrastructure to sustaining it, means crossing a threshold with no clean exit. It threatens the territorial integrity of a nation of 90 million people. It virtually guarantees that no Iranian government, whatever comes after this one, can accept a negotiated settlement without appearing to capitulate to foreign-backed separatism. The political scientist John Mearsheimer, who has studied the logic of American interventionism for decades, notes that regime change in Iran would require the sucks,